you can make a difference. You got to try. Whether it works or not, this is what we're doing. We're bringing attention to it. And I thought at the very least, if people were working out in their own health club, and if they would ask, hey, do you have an AED device here? It might prompt gym owners on their own to do it.
Before we dive in, it's important to remember that the information we provide is for informational purposes only. Every situation is unique, and decisions regarding your health or legal matters should be made after consulting with your own doctor or lawyer. Our aim is to inform and empower, but personal circumstances require personalized advice. Hi, welcome to another edition of Justice in Scrubs. I'm attorney Richard Hastings, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Dr. Jeff Michaelis.
And today we have a very special guest in Suzanne Belagamba Brennan.
Thank you.
So, Suzanne, you have an amazing story that you're going to share with us today. So why don't we start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Well, first, I'm very pleased to be here to share my story, which is really one of community connecting and helping others. I was a happy stay-at-home wife with 3 children. We had a very busy, lifestyle, contributing a lot to local sports and business, and it was really ideal.
And you grew up in Ridgefield?
4th generation, yes. And I think, again, to underscore community, that's a big part of my story.
And can you tell us a bit about your husband and your life together in Ridgefield?
So Ed was a very gregarious, outgoing guy, a great lover of sports, family. In fact, the joke was can't get a word in edwise because he was just a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy. He traveled quite a bit, but when he was home, he was very involved in youth sports, an athlete all his life. And again, he was just a great lover of life.
And how many children did the two of you have?
3 children.
And how old are they today?
They are 26, 28, and 30. But at the time of the loss, they were all in their teens.
So, and that's what we're going to transition into now. And that is something horrific happened to Ed. And if you could just tell us about that.
So it was December 2012, and pre-Christmas, there's an extra air of fun and excitement. And I remember that morning specifically, the hustle and bustle of kids in school and work. But Ed stopped me and he gave me a big hug. And he said, "This is going to be the best Christmas ever. I love you." And that was the last time I spoke with him.
And what happened?
We went on through the day. It was, again, a typical busy day. I happened to be at a Christmas party in Ridgefield, and I received a phone call from my father who had a career in law enforcement, so local RPD called him and said, "Your son-in-law had an accident at the gym." So my dad gave me a call, and I phoned home to the kids. I said, "Dad must have overdone it. I'm heading to meet him at the hospital." When I got there, thinking it was just a minor accident, I ran into 2 of the ambulance drivers that were coming from around the corner. And again, having grown up in Ridgefield, I knew them. And they looked at me and said, "Suzanne, we're so sorry. We did everything we could." And I was stunned. And they realized quickly that I didn't know exactly the extent of what had happened. I remember someone coming from around the corner and putting me in a room. And shortly after, I was ushered down a hallway and handed a bag with his keys. And his wallet and then led in to say goodbye.
And what happened to him?
So while he was working out at the health club, he had spent the afternoon shopping with our youngest daughter, and he said, "Hannah, let's wait for Mom before we go to dinner. I'm going to run to the gym quickly, stay home with the other kids, and then we'll all have a meal together." While he was at the gym, he suffered a sudden cardiac event, and at the time, there was no one there trained to help him, no AED device, and the location of the gym is such that it took a bit of time for help to get there. And I've since learned that for every minute that passes without intervention, you lose 10% of your survivability. So 10 minutes had gone by and he never had a chance.
So you are at the hospital, you just find out this horrific news. What happens then as far as communicating this information to the children?
Word travels fast, and when I walked out into the waiting area of the emergency room, there were dozens and dozens of people, and true to self, I became very focused and announced that I did not want to ride home. I did not need accompaniment. I was going home to my children. And that was by far the worst moment of my life.
Well, I just want to say that I'm so sorry about your loss. And I understand it because my father died when I was 12 years old. And we had a great family, and all of a sudden, the major person was gone. So this could happen to anyone. My father had no prior medical history. He just didn't come home one night. And I'm sure that if there was an AED around, he might still be alive. Your husband, did he have any medical problems?
Well, he'd been an athlete all his life, but in his late 40s did develop a case of AFib, which sometimes caused a rapid heart. But he'd had a pacemaker implanted, which at the time seemed like great insurance that his heart would be regulated with no foreseeable problem.
But he had no other angina or chest pain or any diabetes or anything like that?
Very happy guy.
Happy, healthy guy. So this could happen to anyone.
Mm-hmm. In fact, if I may, it did happen to a friend of his a few years later at the same gym. And that man was saved only because there was another person working out that was trained in CPR.
Right. So little medical stuff here. The major cause of death in someone with a heart attack is an arrhythmia, ventricular fibrillation. And ventricular fibrillation can be totally fixed with 1 or 2 zaps of the AED. And you can actually have a small heart attack that really has minimal damage, and you can get a ventricular fibrillation. So even a minor heart attack can cause sudden death without an AED. So this could happen to anyone, and it can be a minor heart attack. A good percentage of people with heart attacks do get ventricular fibrillation. As a matter of fact, back in the day, when I was in training, we used to pre-treat people for arrhythmias with lidocaine to prevent it from happening. We don't do that anymore because we have AEDs everywhere, thanks to you.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the aftermath of what happened. And you started off by saying you were a stay-at-home mom. You're managing the house. You have the 3 kids at home, and your husband is the breadwinner of the family. And in the blink of an eye, that changes. And what was that like?
Well, I did work part-time and, again, was heavily involved in the community. But my immediate fear was just the day-to-day with the kids, wanting to make sure that they felt that there was still going to be stability. In fact, what I said many times was, things are going to be very different, but they're going to be okay. And I'm the head of household, and I just need each of you to take care of each other and yourselves, and I will take care of the family. Because when a father dies, I felt it lent itself to helplessness, hopelessness. In fact, my youngest daughter had 2 questions. Are we going to be poor now? And are you ever going to wear makeup again? So she looked at me, I knew at that point, as they were observing everything. And I wanted to, get down to business, reestablishing normalcy in the home. But I was devastated. I was so frightened. And in fact, met with you. And you helped instill a great deal of confidence that everything was going to be okay. Thank you.
I know that when my mother said the same thing to us, and she basically told us that we're going to have a great normal life, and she took over. Mm-hmm. And that was so important that we, obviously we were devastated and everything, but we knew, my mother sent me to school the next day. Mm-hmm. She said, life is going to be fine, and I'm going to control it. I'm going to take care of it. And the community, our community took over. My mother never knew how to write a check before. Mm. And back then we used to write checks. So people would sit down with her. I know a friend of ours was an accountant. He came over and sat down with her. A friend of ours was, the community took over. Mm-hmm. Very similar to your experience. And I could just tell you that as a child in the situation, it was very helpful what you did, to sit them down and say, I'm here, I'm in charge, and I'm going to take care of it. That was incredibly important to hear that.
What I think is fascinating is the fact that when you met Suzanne today for the first time, one of the things you shared with her was the fact that your father died of a heart attack. And right away, there's this bonding. And Suzanne and I were going out to this restaurant one evening, and as we were walking in, there was this gentleman, an attorney that I know, in the parking lot. And he's kind of crotchety and a little antisocial. And I just said to him, would you care to join us for a drink? And he looked over and he said, thanks, but, I don't want to talk to anyone. I said, well, you could sit at our table and just not talk to us. And he said, all right. So he comes into the restaurant. We sit down at a table, and Suzanne told the story that she's telling right now. And he stopped. He said, I lost my dad.
Oh, my God.
And immediately there was this amazing connection. And everyone reverts back to, he was 12.
Wow, I was 12 too.
Your husband passes. Your kids are devastated, as you are as well. You go from being a stay-at-home mom to all of a sudden you're the breadwinner, you're the psychiatrist, you're the grief counselor, you're the disciplinarian, you're the everything. You're the dad. What was that like?
I knew I could do it, and I wanted to honor him by doing a good job. And I do remember waking up the very next morning, and my youngest was curled up next to me. She didn't want to sleep alone. In fact, we were both on the sofa because we didn't want to go upstairs. And I thought to myself, if I just work at being the very best person I can be, then it'll all work out. As a mother, as a daughter, as a woman who loves her family. And I'm just a girl of faith, and I knew I could do it. Didn't want to do it, had to do it.
And that's the thing about these situations. I mean, obviously nobody wants to do it, but you wake up one morning and you're that person. Mm-hmm. And you really have 2 options. Pull the covers over your head and become catatonic, or move forward. And you found that strength within yourself to move forward. And that's who you are. You're very determined, motivated, positive, person, and you used all of those qualities of yours to move forward. And I'm wondering what kind of support system you had.
I'm a very lucky girl. Most of my family is still nearby, but my friendship circle and my own giving over the years really turned the tables on me. So I had people coming to me. I didn't have to necessarily seek them out. I also want to back up just for a moment. And while I knew I could do what I needed to do, I was scared. I was very scared. But the daughter of a Marine, I knew I had to rally.
You had to.
Yes. So community was wonderful to me. I've always worked on surrounding myself and my family with the right people, and just to jump back. And again, you were a part of that, so thank you.
You're very welcome. And then a funny story Suzanne was telling me, and I think it's true of most small towns, that people, they want to do something, but they don't know what they can do. So one of the things that you can do, which is relatively easy to do, but it's a way of showing love, is you bring food over.
Right.
So Suzanne said it's like they had this box out in front of the house, and every night it's like loaded with food. And she got to the point where she had to bring it to the fire department every day because it's like, we have too much food.
Yeah.
And she's Italian, so I guess that's what Italians do.
Yes. Fix it with food.
Right.
So at some point in time, you began thinking about AEDs and the importance of AEDs. And where did that lead you? We wanted to take a quick break to remind you about our sponsor, findagreatattorney.com. Dealing with the aftermath of an accident or injury can be overwhelming. And the last thing you want to worry about is finding the right lawyer. Findagreatattorney.com simplifies the process by connecting you with one of the top attorneys in your area who specializes in your specific type of case. Whether you've been injured in a car accident, suffered a slip and fall, or experienced medical malpractice, Findagreatattorney.com has a network of experienced lawyers ready to help. And remember, their service is completely free, so you can focus on your recovery without worrying about the cost of legal representation. If you or someone you know needs legal assistance, don't hesitate to visit findagreatattorney.com and let them match you with one of the best lawyers in your area for your needs.
Well, just to give you a little background on the whisper, because it wasn't like I had a giant dawning moment, but my youngest had asked me a number of times, do you think Daddy would still be alive if they'd had an AED? And I would say, that's something that I can't answer, but maybe we can make a difference going forward for another family. And time went on because it really was a matter of keeping the family together, getting the kids through school, just the day-to-day challenges. And then 2020 hit. And there was a time when I had to do a lot of free thinking for my job, and we were all trying to figure our way through that. And I think that helped me jump a little bit outside of my regular busy schedule. And I thought, what if we could do this? What if we could make it mandatory? Because I was very distressed to find out that a lot of gyms still didn't have AEDs. And in a facility where people are intentionally raising their heart rates not to have an AED, it just seemed ludicrous. And the building, the facility that I manage, we have an AED. We do regular CPR trainings. I thought, but not health clubs? It was ludicrous. So I just took off on Google and started how to get a bill written,
Wow.
how to the School of Rock commercials from our youth started coming back to me. And I just started an email campaign. Just started emailing public health. I did reach out to one area rep who said, Suzanne, it'll never happen. Everybody's up to their eyeballs with COVID. It'll never happen. And I thought, but it's the right thing. It needs to happen. So I reached out to former Senator Will Haskell, the young senator, and when you share your story, people either connect with it or don't. But as quickly as we connected, when you have that in common, he said that he had a close friend who lost her father. And he said, we're going to do this. I'm going to write this bill. Yeah, he was remarkable.
Can I bring you back a little bit? You said your daughter or your son asked you that question?
My youngest daughter.
And how did she get that information? How old was she at the time?
She was 14.
She was 14, and she knew what an AED was.
Well, she knew that there wasn't anyone trained to help him. So she didn't necessarily know about the technology of an AED, but even as a younger person, she thought, why didn't anyone help him?
Oh, I see. And then you spoke to her about an AED, or?
That came later because certainly I didn't want her to think that he would absolutely be walking around. I mean, chances are it would have been life-saving, but we don't know. And I live here and now, and I didn't want to go back too much.
So not only will you bring your family through this problem, you then took on another obligation, obligation. And that's amazing that you're able to get the strength to do that. So tell us the process of how, I know you spoke to the congressman or whatever, and then Senator. Mm-hmm. And then what happened after that?
So Senator Haskell and at the time State Rep Gervallo, they said, it's really up to you, Suzanne, to get the word out. And I'm very persistent, but I'm also very patient, and I just emailed. I didn't know who was Democrat, who was Republican, who did what. Public health. I went on the website, got the list, and just started hammering away. I'm a pretty decent writer. I concocted a very concise message, why I was doing what I was doing, added in some factual information, and got a few bites. And very interesting that Dr. William Pettit from Cheshire was an advocate. And also there was someone who responded to me, a senator who said, I think I knew your husband. I had met him at a wedding once. And then I also targeted his hometown, any politicians in Stratford that were athletes. I was always trying to tap into that familiar chord with people, something that would resonate with everyone. People that work out in gyms, people who had suffered personal loss.
I just wanted to go back for 1 second when you said Dr. Pettit. Dr. Pettit was a physician in Cheshire, Connecticut, and his wife and daughters were murdered, and their house was lit on fire. And he went through this horrific ordeal. And I think, again, the connection there with the loss you suffered and the loss he suffered, brought him that much closer to, yes, I want to help you. And you were always looking to see how you could get in the back door. Mm-hmm. How can you connect with somebody, whether it's the sports community or whether it's people that have suffered a loss or, however you could do that, whether they lived in the same town. And I think probably the best thing you heard in the early stages of this was from the state rep who said, oh, Suzanne, this will never happen, which knowing you said, well, yes, it will, and I'm going to show you how.
Right. I think the idea about putting a face on a legislation is very helpful. Do you agree with that?
I do, because just the psychology of who we all are, anything that we find relatable is important to us. And And also, this was the right thing to do. So many people were surprised, as was I, that health clubs are not required to have an AED device. And interestingly, last summer, I had a mother reach out to me, and her daughter was running at a huge sports facility in a nearby town. And she said that she asked if they had an AED, and they said no. And she said, goodness, that seems wrong. And they said that they were not required under the law. So I looked into it, and with Will Haskell's help, he looked them up, and their license was actually as a youth facility and not a health club, even though children there were engaging in sports. So I then reached out to the public health director of that town. I knew that that town also sent all their summer kids in need to that program for camp. And I said it was egregious that that facility didn't have an AED, and they quickly gone.
Now, you have an AED there. Mm-hmm. Is there an obligation of training, or is there a process or a handbook that you came up with?
I did not come up with it, but the way that Senator Haskell wrote the bill, it is an AED is required along with one trained staff person at all times.
And one of the big objections, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the big objections was from the health clubs, well, we don't, have the time to train people. And you can watch a 5-minute YouTube video on how you become conversant in the use of an AED.
Yes, AEDs are not only incredibly life-saving, the way they have it set up, it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it's verbal. There's not only is there written cues, there's verbal cues. Do this, then do this. So, a 5-minute video, and watch, and just do it once or twice, and that's all you need to do. You don't need a trained, professional to do this. Anybody could do it.
So why don't you just tell us from a medical standpoint what an AED is and what it does?
Right. So ventricular fibrillation can go on to sudden death. So we consider sudden death is basically if someone dies suddenly. And the most common cause of sudden death is an arrhythmia, ventricular fibrillation. And that just, what it does is the heart stops because of the electrical problem. And so what ventricular fibrillation needs to do to treat it is you need to actually stop the heart, and then it restarts properly. Sort of like a computer, right? When your computer screws up, what do you first do? You turn it on and turn it off. That's exactly what you're doing with an AED. You're turning on and turning off the heart. And then it just resets itself most of the time. If there's not significant damage to the heart, you should be able to restart a ventricular fibrillation or prevent sudden death. 1 shock or 2 shocks. And it's magic. It's one of the true magics of medicine.
And we've heard, certainly in the news a lot, and I'm sure you could speak more to this, about young athletes.
Yes.
Who have been saved through AEDs on the field and in airplanes.
Right. So young athletes not frequently, but it's not uncommon to have cardiomyopathy. They get an athletic heart. So the heart is thicker, and it's more prone to ventricular fibrillation or arrhythmias than a regular population. Hank Gathers, I don't know if you remember that name. He died of ventricular fibrillation, 10, 20 years ago. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. He was just a young kid. And I think he was in college. And he died of sudden death. That was probably 20 or 30 years ago.
So I'm curious about the process. So for people that are listening and they have some type of law they would like to see on the books that has to do with something like you're talking about, walk us through the process. I mean, you said first that you contacted a state rep, you contacted a state senator, you told your story, and then you interested a number of people by sending out this very well-written email. Mm-hmm. Walk us through that process if you can.
There really was not a lot of difficulty to it. It's all about persistence. Once you have emails and you can go on to the government website, and I did research some backgrounds of people to find out who might be most interested, but I just stayed on. And when I didn't get a response from some people that I thought really would be helpful in this process, I reached out to local media in their area and said that your state rep is not responding or involved in passing this very important legislation, just to apply whatever gentle pressure I could, because it was the right thing to do. I also got testimonials from, there was one gentleman, a neighbor, in fact, who had moved to Connecticut a few years beforehand, who said he had been saved twice in another state in a gym with an AED. Twice.
Wow.
And you're talking about, they come up with legislation throughout the year, like if you're in high school and you're going to dissect a frog, that you should get permission of your parents before requiring it. I mean, things that are just like, what are you talking about? And now you bring forth this idea to have a law enacted that will place AEDs in a facility where people are intentionally raising their heartbeats that could possibly and probably save lives. I mean, what's more important than saving lives?
For those that would say, oh, it's too expensive, I would say just that. What price a life? And they're not cost prohibitive now. I mean, anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400, you can get something. And also, while I was very community-minded and wanted to make a difference for other families, equally as important for me was I wanted to set an example for my kids. I wanted to show them that, you can make a difference. You got to try. Whether it works or not, this is what we're doing. We're bringing attention to it. And I thought at the very least, if people were working out in their own health club, and if they would ask, hey, do you have an AED device here? It might prompt gym owners on their own to do it.
Because it's the right thing. Exactly. You're not asking them to do some crazy, thing that has very little value. This is something that's very, very important. And it's very important because you're a story about what could have been, perhaps.
And the fact that a friend of Ed's in the football community, again, athlete, no perceivable health issues, went down in that same gym and only survived because there was someone else there. In fact, his wife in the emergency room thanked the doctor, and he said, don't thank me, thank the kid that was there that started CPR.
You're making telephone calls, you're writing letters, you're sending emails, you're calling the press. How does this evolve to the next level?
So that was really in the hands of Will Haskell, and he had to garner enough votes to bring it to the floor. And in fact, I was in Florida on vacation, and I got a text. He said, log on, I'm going to present. And he presented it, and the votes just went up, and it was done.
So he had drafted a bill. Mm-hmm. He had, largely through your efforts, gotten the support of other legislators. Mm-hmm. He emails you while you're in Florida, and you go on whatever
He texted me. He said, Suzanne, 5 minutes, I'm on.
And then you watched on this program or online. Will Haskell talking about this bill, talking about you, talking about your family, talking about your experience.
Yes, it was incredible. And the governor then signed it June 2021, just in time for Father's Day that year.
And what is the bill?
So the bill requires health clubs and gyms to maintain an AED on site with at least one trained staff person.
And that's a requirement?
Mm-hmm. As of October 2021, that's law.
So one of the other tasks or functions that you've kind of stepped into is that you have a lot of people that have gone through similar situations contacting you about the loss of a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you tell them?
That they're not alone. In fact, I'm taking a longtime Ridgefielder to dinner tomorrow, just to show her that things do get better and that she's not alone, and things will be okay. In my line of work as well, I counsel people. It's an events venue, but we also
Why don't you plug your venue, which is a wonderful venue in town?
Lounsbury House, magnificent venue for all of life's memorable events, and the former home of Governor Lounsbury.
And can be located at lounsburyhouse.org?
That's correct. But I often say we're not in the events business, we're in the relationship business. And I love that part of my job. So, in the sad event of the loss of a loved one, wanting to do a celebration of life, there have been times I'm on the phone or in a meeting for 2 hours or more, following up with them, because I do care, and we're all in it together. And there was a time with my children too that you can't tap into someone else's grief, but you can teach them how to transform it in some ways. And what I mean by that is acts of service. So for the children, I would say, if you're having a really bad day, go do something nice for someone else. In fact, my youngest, there was a time we took a trip to the dollar store and I cashed a $20 bill into 20 singles, and she made a Post-it note for each bill and hid them all around the dollar store. It's a real transformative thing to help others.
And to teach others to help others, I think, is the bigger lesson.
Yeah, I like that.
I should maybe go to the Patent and Trademark Office. And
say it again.
Trademark
say it again.
I've forgotten it already. No, I think it's really important. So, for example, with my kids, every Thanksgiving, I would take them to the Cows Outside in Danbury, where they would give away food and clothing to the homeless people. And most people volunteer if their parents volunteered.
Right.
It's kind of a learned skill. And the more things like you do, and I think the most remarkable lesson was teaching your kids that one person can make a difference. Yes. And I want to kind of talk again about persistence, about getting beaten down, about being incredibly overwhelmed, and how you get up and just put one foot in front of the other and move forward. How did you do that, and what was that like?
Are you talking about that in terms of the law or in terms of everyday living?
Well, in terms of the law, because that was really, it almost seemed insurmountable. I mean, it's kind of one of these tilting at windmills, like, oh, I'd like to pass a law. And everyone's like, oh, that's so nice, good luck.
Yeah. I never thought it wouldn't happen. I just didn't know how long it would take. But I always thought it would happen because it was the right thing. And I'm a prayerful girl. And I had many a morning where I was appealing to the heavens, make this happen. It's the right thing. And then you helped.
just a little bit. But one of Suzanne's gifts is the fact that she's very charming, but she's incredibly persistent. So she will call, she will text, she will email, she will write. She will send you an email the next day. I don't know if you didn't see my email yesterday, but
circling back.
Just circling back. And I think it's such an amazing lesson in that you've taught your kids that anything is possible.
Thank you.
So how has the passing of this legislation affected you and your journey and your family?
Well, it's something that it's a piece of the healing for us, knowing that we likely have saved another family from suffering a similar tragedy. But it's also become bigger than just the law. So what I mean by that is many local businesses saw the story. I've connected with them. They've purchased AED devices. I personally solicited and got a donation for a local preschool so they would have an AED on site. And the more that we talk about these things, the more educated people come. I even know a local businessman that got them for all 4 of his businesses and for his home. Because it is simple, it's life-saving. And there was a university that did a study that even a 9-year-old was able to administer. So when you say, how has it changed my life? It's made me happy. It's made me really grateful that there are people there to help. You know, when you want to make a difference, the right people are out there, but you got to keep going, and you got to smile about it, even if it's not a pleasant thing. Life is hard for people. They want to connect and do the right thing, but sometimes getting there is tough. So again, I'm not the bravest person, but I want to make a difference in a nice way. I want to be remembered in a happy way.
And you've been in newspapers, you've been in magazines, you've been on television, you've been interviewed a number of times about this law and about your journey and about what you've been through. And I think it's an absolutely remarkable story, and that it will literally save lives, in that if somebody's in a gym and they have a cardiac event and there's an AED, the chances of them being saved are quite great.
Important just for people to know that kind of be aware of your surroundings. What I'd like to do next, there are roughly 46 businesses in Ridgefield that have AED devices of their own accord, but you might not necessarily know that. So I'd like window clings or some identifiable way for people to know where there's an AED. And also for people to think twice. If you live in a remote area, you might want to consider a home AED. Going to your gym, ask if they have an AED on site.
And you had, I think, an intern working for you at one point in time, and you had your intern research by calling facilities, what facilities had AEDs and what facilities did not.
It's pretty surprising how many didn't.
So the interesting thing to me is the fact that not only do you go through this Herculean effort of having this law passed, but then it's not enough just to sit back and say, oh, we have this law. Then you're the person going out and seeing if health clubs and gyms are abiding by this law.
Ultimately, I'd like to think people want to do the right thing, but maybe it just gets put over to the side. So just to be that constant reminder or that ever-present whisper, oh, yeah, got to do that.
I don't think it's a whisper from you.
It's a loud whisper.
It's a very loud whisper. So how can people get involved in promoting causes that have to do with AEDs?
Well, what I would ask is just like feet on the street. When you're going to your gym, if you're in a business, just ask. Just ask. Because I do have a list of all Connecticut gyms, and it's a long list. Sadly, I know of a gentleman in Upper Connecticut who brought it to the attention of his gym that they were not compliant with the law, and they wouldn't renew his membership.
Really?
Mm.
Yeah.
So
he since took it to the local news. I'm not sure how that turned out, but that was disappointing. But I thought, good for you. You know, you stuck to it, because him and a lot of his peers, they were older gentlemen, and he was concerned for not only himself but his friends.
And I think that's probably the best way to get involved in the movement. And that is, when you go to your gym, say, do you have an AED here? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, the next question is, why not? You're required to by law. Mm-hmm. And if they, don't give you a decent answer, perhaps the next thing is to If it's a corporate-owned entity, write to the corporation. If it's a smaller entity or a company that's not going to do anything, get the press involved.
Yes, because awareness is key, and we don't need to stop at health clubs even. Bank chains. Ask at your bank. You can speak to that. You can be stricken anywhere at any time.
Sports stadiums, concert halls, large venues, gymnasiums, auditoriums.
And, many of the AED suppliers on a local level will also provide free training.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So as our time is drawing to a close, I wanted to just ask you if there's a message, a thought, a word of wisdom, something that you'd like to share to kind of close us out.
I think that we are all uniquely blessed with gifts, and sometimes it just takes a quiet moment to realize how lucky we all are. Even through loss, even through difficult times, you can make a difference for others. And after all, why are any of us here? To love each other, to learn, and to make a difference. Whether you're planting a beautiful garden or you're teaching at a preschool, can do something. It matters. Everything we do matters, and everything we don't do matters. So,
yeah, I think your mantra was, it's the right thing to do. And you weren't going to stop, because you said also that you're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And it's the right thing to do. So those are two really important mantras that you used to bring you through the process, because the process maybe it wasn't as easy as you say. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I think it's helpful if you say to yourself, "This is going to work," and it's the right thing to do.
I just didn't know how long it would take, but.
And the big message I received through this and watching you through this process is the fact that one person can make a difference.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.